and modernizing the agricultural sector, as well as utilizing or adopting technologies that are appropriate for the continent, are all areas where Africa can learn from China. And so there's a lot of expectation in that regard in terms of the technological cooperation and the depth of partnership that China can offer Africa.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Owiro, for your insights there. That, of course, is David Owiro. He's the Executive Director at the Africa Development Think Tank. Well, let's shift focus now. The International Monetary Fund has urged Tunisia to cut its wage bill and limit energy subsidies to reduce a fiscal deficit. Now, the directive is likely to put more pressure on the fragile government amid a severe financial and political crisis. From Tunis, here's Adnan Shaushi with the details.
Tunisia is facing a delicate balance to balance its finances amid a worsening political crisis. The North African state has run its government for years with a high fiscal deficit that rose to 11.5% of GDP in 2020. Its 2021 budget forecasts borrowing needs at $7.2 billion, including about $5 billion in foreign loans. The country's economy and finance minister has, however, assured that the state is implementing reforms to reduce the public sector wage bill that rose to 17.6% of GDP and which is among the highest in the world.
This government is aware of the challenges that we are facing. Among the challenges is the salary mass. We are going to work on state salary mass to find solution to make it acceptable for the state budget.
The Washington-based lender has also recommended that the government push for achieving a low and stable inflation. The fund's experts urged the Central Bank of Tunisia to avoid any monetary financing of the budget deficit, allow the exchange rate to adjust to market developments, and continue to monitor the financial sector for signs of borrower distress and bad debts.
We are going to revamp the system and to try to make it more efficient and to try to really support the people of low and medium income to address the difficult situation they are facing. In the same time, we believe that with what we are living with the pandemic, and COVID has hit us badly, not only Tunisia but the world, the government is here to support as well the companies to enable us to be strong.
The fund called for a broader social dialogue in Tunisia and urged the creation of a national structure to manage ailing public enterprises. Accordingly, the social dialogue would pave the way for undertaking recommended economic and social reforms.
Without dialogue and a real roadmap, this critical situation could worsen further and affect the social and economic levels. Reforms are needed urgently, but we have not seen any serious attempts or concrete projects by successive governments. Tunisian authorities are very slow in taking decisions.
IMF officials explained that the current government needs to engage in a national dialogue with all stakeholders to make sure the Tunisian society endorses proposed reforms and thus secure their implementation. The IMF also recommends that the Tunisian authorities redouble their efforts to advance good governance and transparency, as well as in the fight against corruption. Experts assert that making progress in these areas will attract investment and support growth and job creation. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
Again, he can hold in guns. Machine guns from police forces towards the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
Thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant.
Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
And just about half past the hour, let's recap today's top headlines. China's top political advisory body has started its annual session. Wang Yang, who chairs the National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, delivered the advisory body's work report for the last year. Now, Wang Yang said the top political advisory body will have sessions in various formats to facilitate the formulation of China's 14th five-year plan. Meanwhile, Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta has flagged off a dispatch of vaccines from the central depot on the outskirts of the capital, Nairobi, to other parts of the nation. This will kick off the first phase of the national vaccination exercise, targeting 1.25 million people. Kenya is set to receive 24 million doses through the COVAX vaccine sharing facility. Healthcare workers and frontline workers, including security personnel and teachers, will be on the priority list to get the jab first. And the Arab League has renewed Ahmed Abdul Gate's term as Secretary General for the organization. Abdul Gate was elected in 2016 and will now serve until 2026. Now, ahead of his reappointment, Saudi Minister of State for African Affairs Ahmed Katan asked Arabs to empower the Arab League with a major reform to make the organization as effective as the African Union and the EU. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. And to some international news now. Hong Kong's stock market has been one of the best performing this year, with the Hang Seng Index up more than almost all other major global benchmarks. Its strong performance is largely thanks to capital flows from the Chinese mainland, with investors looking offshore for value and opportunities. Here's Joel Flynn reporting.
Lunar New Year celebrations may have been muted in Hong Kong last month, but when it comes to stocks, this year the city's market is looking better than anywhere else in the world. The first 3 weeks of 2021 saw the best trade in nearly 4 decades for the city's benchmark. As of March the 1st, the Hang Seng Index has added almost 8% year to date. That's more than stocks in New York, London, Japan, and the Chinese mainland.
It suggests to me that 2 Chinese investors are actually looking at Hong Kong as a viable asset. I think mostly this is happening around the IPO markets, to be honest with you. And I think this is where the flavor of the day happens, is on these larger tech companies coming to the fore.
Tech shares have led the charge offshore, with companies like Tencent and Meituan up more than 20% since the start of January. Most of that growth has come from investors in the Chinese mainland. As of the start of February, mainland funds made up $47.6 billion in net purchases of Hong Kong stocks. That made them the largest single driver of prices in the second largest capital market in Asia.
Because they can't participate in the IPO lottery. So, most of them are just going into the secondary market, which tend to be quite volatile. So every day, you see, rather big fluctuations of fund flow going in and out of the Hong Kong market.
The huge changes have come as Hong Kong itself continues to struggle with COVID-19. This year's budget announced that in order to pay for more spending, the government was increasing a tax on stock trades by 30%.
Further market reforms are also currently planned, as well as an expansion in Hang Seng's indices. Hong Kong is also looking to boost cross-border investment channels with Shanghai and Shenzhen.
That includes the creation of a southbound Bond Connect scheme that will give Chinese mainland investors access to Asia's third largest debt market.
I think it's an evolution, and I think this is what investors like to see, is they're not sitting on past laurels. They're looking to evolve, looking to create new channels, looking to add new constituents to their overall base. This is positive because it's adapting to the way the market's trending.
Hong Kong's market capitalization has overtaken Japan's this year. In January, it was up 41% compared to last year. More IPOs are in the pipeline too, including Didi Chuxing and JD.com's logistics arm, which, along with others, could raise almost $60 billion offshore this year. That's why, for investors in Hong Kong, some say the year of the ox may already be in full bloom. Joel Flynn, CGTN, Hong Kong.
Meanwhile, Germany's economy continues to be impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, where restrictions such as lockdown measures in the services sector remain in place. Here's Ryan Thompson with the details.
It's been far from business as usual here in Germany since mid-December. Major chunks of the economy remain at a standstill because of coronavirus restrictions. But despite all of that, the nation's unemployment figures appear relatively untouched in February and have weathered the second wave well. The jobless rate was unchanged from January at 6.3%, with just shy of 3 million people registered as unemployed. But this does not account for the millions who are at home, unable to actually go to work because of lockdown restrictions on retail shops, restaurants, and other service sectors. Short-term work schemes from the federal government have kept some of them on their employers' payrolls, and in some cases with only a little bit of a dent in their take-home pay. That's still done little to help retailers actually survive this crisis. German retail sales tumbled far more than expected in January. And when I say far more, it is quite significant, more than 4% higher than the 0.3% that economists had predicted. Now, good news is not expected for retailers anytime soon. Shops will remain shut until infections decrease significantly. Germany's 16 state premiers are meeting with the Chancellor Angela Merkel on Wednesday to discuss a path out of lockdown. But according to leaked documents, it is likely that this shutdown will be extended until the end of the month. Ryan Thompson, CGTN, Frankfurt.
And the UK government has announced ambitious support for businesses as part of its fiscal budget for 2021. It is aimed at boosting the country's economic recovery that has been overshadowed by COVID-19. Naweed Jabrakil reports from London.
There appears to be light at the end of the tunnel, but COVID-19 is still casting plenty of shadows over the UK economy. GDP fell almost 10% last year, and more than 700,000 people have lost their jobs. Finance Minister Rishi Sunak has the task of trying to weather the nation through the storm and promised more help in these unprecedented times.
Much has changed, but one thing has stayed the same. I said I would do whatever it takes. I have done, and I will do so.
Businesses and workers will breathe a sigh of relief at the extension of the furlough scheme to September, meaning the government will cover up to 80% of wages. $7 billion in grants will be offered to keep Britain's struggling high streets going. They've been battered by the pandemic, which has forced many shops to close for good. And there'll be a further $2.3 billion for vaccines to ensure its rapid rollout continues.
Yet again, the man in charge of Britain's finances has moved to reassure people the government will do more to support them through this crisis. But with public borrowing soaring to almost $380 billion during the pandemic, the cost of these measures is rising. Then there's the impact of Brexit, which is weighing on small and medium-sized businesses in particular. And despite the UK's world-leading vaccine progress, there remains significant uncertainty around COVID-19 and new mutations, which will pose another risk to any economic recovery.
One way to pay for the ballooning debt is a rise in taxes. Individuals have been largely spared this time, but businesses will soon have to pay more.
In 2023, the rate of corporation tax paid on company profits will increase to 25%. Even after this change, the United Kingdom will still have the lowest corporation tax rate in the G7.
The Chancellor says this year and next, the total cost of the UK's COVID support measures will be almost $500 billion. And amid hopes of a rapid recovery, the warning that it will take many years to pay it back. Naweed Jabrakil, CGTN, London.
Well, let's now turn our focus to commodity markets today. Oil prices dipped ahead of talks between OPEC and its allied producer OPEC Plus on whether to ease production cuts. But we did see its price rally at some point after Saudi Arabia's oil minister urged caution from producers as they gathered virtually. Also, a record jump in U.S. crude oil stocks after Texas refinery outages continues to bear on prices going forward. Meanwhile, gold prices hovering near a 9-month low today as rising U.S. Treasury yields kept prices under pressure. Now, analysts say in the short term, gold is on a bearish trend as most fundamentals are stacked against it. Well, let's take a short break now, still coming up. This engineer is helping Nigerian farmers to turn food surplus to profit. And we try out an app that guides motorists to natural gas fueling stations in Egypt.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Now, Nigeria is Africa's second largest producer of fresh tomatoes with an annual production of about 2.3 million tons. The country, however, loses most of its domestic production to wastage every year. But one Nigerian engineer and renewable energy expert has now devised a cheap method to assist local farmers turn the food surplus to profit. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with the story.
Tomatoes are a staple food in Nigeria and are predominantly grown in the country's northern region. During the rainy season, tomatoes are scarce and the price of a basket can go as high as $44. But in the dry season, supply exceeds demand and prices drop significantly as a result of the glut. And that's where Yahya Ahmed and his team at the Developmental Association for Renewable Energies DARE come in. The group seeks to save the food and save farmers from bankruptcy in glut season through the use of renewable energy.
We have our farmers who are suffering because they cannot process their harvest. They work hard the whole year round. When they harvest, the whole thing is in glut, it goes wasted. So this is our main aim, to sensitize, create awareness among the really local populace, because they are the ones suffering more. That there's something, they have access to this energy relatively cheaper than all other sources. We have abundance of renewable energy. And mostly here in the north, we have the sun, more than what we need. And we can tap into it.
Ahmed came up with the idea of this solar dryer to help farmers preserve their farm produce in the glut season. Once the dryer is assembled, the diced tomatoes are spread on it and covered up. The hot air from the solar-powered dryer then heats up the tomatoes. Because of the high water content, it takes 3 days for the tomatoes to dry up, looking like this.
So it maintains over 90% of all its ingredients. So if this thing dried now, the tomatoes dry now, you take it, if you smell it, you still feel the aroma of the tomato, you feel the scent of the tomato. If you put it in your mouth, you feel that you are eating tomato. So we go to the farms now, where the people cultivate the tomatoes. We harvest it with them and tell them, look, our aim is to let you know that not even one single tomato should go rotten. And you people have to come out with more money than what you invested in it, not always having debt and have to pay debt.
It takes up to 2 weeks if farmers choose to dry their produce under the open sun. And not only is that unhygienic, the ultraviolet rays of the sun destroy most of the nutrients in the tomatoes. But with Ahmed's solar dryer, the nutritional value is maintained and it helps farmers cut losses.
We are forced to import all forms of tomato products. Why? This is waste for our country, waste for the people who produce, because they produce it and they throw it away. And this is what we are trying to avoid. And this is so simple. You don't need any maintenance. The only maintenance you need for the solar panels is to clean the surface.
Some tomato farmers in Nigeria's northwest Kaduna state, where Ahmed and his team operate, are already patronizing the solar dryer initiative, helping them to avoid waste and make more money. And perhaps most importantly, it's environmentally friendly. Deji Batmos, CGTN, Kaduna, Nigeria.
Meanwhile, when Nigeria's commercial city of Lagos imposed a lockdown, Ruth Oladimeji saw an opportunity to earn extra money. With people unable to visit banks, she decided to set herself up as an agent, providing banking services in her community. While mobile money firms have ramped up agent numbers to meet the increased demand for financial services at a time when galloping inflation as well as high unemployment have pushed Nigerians to seek work.
Civil servant Ruth Oladimeji saw a way to earn extra money when Nigeria's megacity Lagos imposed a lockdown last year. Ruth signed up with MoneyPoint, a mobile money service.
It has increased my standard of living. It has made my family, that is my daddy's side, my mother's side, it has given me much respect. So it has helped me to be able to support people financially.
Ruth has set up 6 kiosks in her community in just under a year, and she now earns more than $160 every day in a country where most people live on less than $2 a day. Mobile money firms across Africa are ramping up plans to bring banking to millions of people across the continent.
Demand has increased because of the influx of people coming into agency banking, and with that demand we've literally grown like 900% in the industry. We've had like $3.9 billion in transaction revenue processed since the pandemic, and then we've also grown our agents by, I think we have around 50,000 agents now across the country.
Firms in Nigeria say they have ramped up the number of agents to meet demand.
People could not go to the banks. Naturally, the agency business then also increased because more and more people knew that, oh, I could then offer this type of service. I could become an agent for a bank since we can't go to the banks. And the banks, when they had to operated skeletally, they had shorter closing periods, and it just became necessary to have somebody in your neighborhood who could help you to access financial services.
Although the preference for cash is deeply entrenched in Nigeria, just like other parts of Africa, the imposed COVID-19 safety protocols have created room for diversification of financial services.
I like coming to an agent because it is very close to my house. And I also don't like going to the bank because of the crowd. And ever since when I've been using this agent, it has been very, their service has been very, very good.
The last national representative survey conducted in 2019 showed that only 3.3% of Nigerian adults reported having mobile money accounts.
Since I see myself to have developed into a microfinance business, I'll still be doing my agency banking, but I believe it would have grown to that extent of being a microfinance, maybe in a locality. A microfinance in a locality helping people to finance, getting their daily savings.
Financial experts say there has been a steady increase in digital and mobile financial services driven by the pandemic, and this has created room for success of fintech firms such as local startup Paystack, which was bought by US payment company Stripe for $200 million last year. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Now, Egypt has launched a new mobile application that guides motorists to the location of nearest natural gas fueling stations. Authorities say the app is part of the country's efforts to convert car engines to run on natural gas. Here's Yasser Hakim with more on that report.
The new mobile application that's known as MOP Stations or Ministry of Petroleum application is still in the experimental stage. It's part of a presidential initiative launched in July to encourage owners of private cars, microbuses and taxis to convert their vehicles to run on natural gas instead of or alongside gasoline. The app shows users the closest natural gas stations around them.
From the statistics, we find that there should be one gas station for every 1,000 cars. Currently, we only have 230 gas stations. Officials expect there will be 670,000 vehicles on natural gas by 2023, which means we will need at least another 640 stations by 2023. Building these gas stations is a joint effort by both the public and private sectors.
Launched just at the beginning of this month, most of the drivers are still not aware of the application, but there is optimism it will offer more options for users.
We only face one problem, which is the crowded gas stations, because they're not enough. We spend long hours at the stations, so to have more options is good. The application will show me the closest station. We need it very much. I discovered a new gas station by coincidence on the Alexandria Road. Perhaps with the app, I would have known about it earlier and used it.
The app is part of the government's ambitious drive to replace fuel-run vehicles with renewable energy-powered engines. In its first stage, around 420,000 vehicles were converted into natural gas, while locally produced electric cars will be introduced by the end of 2021.
It's a win-win situation. The state and the citizens both benefit. The state pays about $30 billion a year for fuel imports, yet it has a surplus of 3 trillion cubic meters of natural gas reserves. It wants to make use of the available natural gas instead of fuel, and so will significantly reduce the fuel imports bill. For the citizens, they will benefit by saving around 60% of fuel expenses if they use natural gas instead. In addition, we will have a cleaner environment.
And the drivers are convinced the conversion to natural gas is the way forward.
Natural gas saves me money because I drive all day and this is my source of income. Natural gas is cheaper than fuel and therefore my income has increased.
The services on the MOP Stations application are expected to expand to electric car charging stations and maintenance facilities to add to the gas stations. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And before we leave you today, here's a quick look at Africa's currencies. South Africa's rand firming up in early trading today as investors wait for a speech by US Fed chairman. That, of course, may determine the trend for global bond markets and, of course, currencies going forward. Now, we saw it end up closing the day flat as the dollar ticked up slightly, losing some gains. Meanwhile, Nigeria's naira weakening slightly after a rally in oil prices saw it gain in the previous session. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.